Alpesh Patel, the CEO of the private equity house Profinium Partners. Good morning, Alpesh.
Morning.
Loving the beard, loving the beard. There was Nicolae Ceausescu, and he would probably have been proud of a decree like this. So basically, if you're an official and you've committed a corrupt act, but the financial damage is less than $50,000, don't worry, you don't have to go to jail.
Yeah, it's quite a big threshold, isn't it? And which country goes around saying we're going to make corruption less criminal? I mean, you normally tighten the screw, don't you? We as a company, we invest in Romania, we invest in wind farms over there. We're familiar with the economy, and you know this country has such huge potential, and the EU has pointed that out. And they've got aspirations to be a regional leader, a regional powerhouse, and over again. And we don't expect this from Europe, do we? Corruption is dragging them down. At least the people are absolutely furious with this. But it is an absolute crying shame that a country with so much potential has so much wastage. And you mentioned Ceausescu. Well, after they nationalized those industries, and in an attempt over the last, 25 years to privatize them since he was overthrown, they've still not managed to privatize huge chunks because of corruption.
I mean, one of the officials in the government saying, well, this is partly because we have just such overcrowded prisons. It's a real problem. We wanted to create some space. Yeah,
here's an idea. Build more prisons. You don't say, oh no, we're going to let the criminals out because there's so many of them. You build more prisons is probably the right answer, and you get tougher on them. Otherwise, their country is just not going to move forward, and it's bad news for Europe. You know, all the people we're based here in Britain, they'll be thinking, well, thank God we're out of the EU. Just look at what goes on. I mean, they're going to see positives out of this, but they really need to get their act in order in Romania, unfortunately.
Yeah, I must have been sleeping when Sean Spicer, the press secretary of the White House, was at the podium and then interrupted his own press conference to say, here's Michael Flynn, our national security advisor, and here comes Michael Flynn and talks about America's position regarding the Iranian nuclear test. Yes,
so the message from the Trump administration to Iran is that you're on notice. I don't know what that means. You're on notice for a missile test, which
we're watching you, and we want to regulate it, monitor it.
Because the Iranians weren't already aware that the Americans were watching them. Apparently, allegedly, for a breach of UN regulation on missile tests, which could benefit their nuclear program. Okay, and they're saying, and you're on notice because you could be harming our friends and allies in the Middle East. I didn't know the Trump White House had friends and allies in the Middle East outside of Israel, but apparently Saudi Arabia is not on the list, and it's one of their friends. So they're sticking up for the Saudis. You see, they're not anti-Muslim at all in the White House.
It's quite interesting, though, the timing in terms of Iran doing this on Sunday, when, the Secretary of State hadn't actually been officially in yet. Some of the key members of Trump's team in the White House are not actually either in the job officially yet or just literally got in the job.
They thought they could sneak a missile test in and...
Or just test the new administration and see what the reaction is.
It may well be. That would be interesting to see. When are the warships moving in, Mr. Trump, into the region to flex your muscle? Because he seems like the kind of man who'd want to do that.
Okay, actually, can I pick up on this very interesting point that Sally has mentioned, testing the new administration? First of all, let's say Iran has insisted it hasn't broken the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
But as far as testing the administration goes, so the American administration is having a go at Tehran, while the NATO allies in Europe are having a go at Russia for what's been happening in eastern Ukraine over the past 4 days. Many people are saying that Vladimir Putin is giving Donald Trump an early test with what's happening in eastern Ukraine. That's an interesting juxtaposition of the two issues.
No, he's been given a carte blanche as Vladimir Putin by Donald Trump. Do what you want, we're staying out of your way. I mean, that's pretty clear, okay? And as far as Iran's concerned, in terms of testing the administration, I don't think anybody in Tehran thinks that Trump's going to be soft, certainly with his words. The point is, I think they're just thinking, we can do whatever we want, which is exactly what they've said. We can do whatever we want. Well, let's see what you're going to do, Mr. Trump, on this. I can't imagine that the Trump administration is trying to stick up for the Saudis.
Yeah. The big story for us yesterday on BBC World News was Arun Jaitley's budget that he delivered in India yesterday. Mixed reaction to what he had to say. Of course, one of the key things he had to talk about was the demonetisation that they enacted swiftly with hardly any notice at the end of last year and the chaos that's caused. What did you make of his budget?
Well, I actually went through it all, would you believe? And We were talking about corruption earlier on. Actually, this is a budget to expand the tax base. In other words, make sure more people pay tax by reducing tax rates for the poorest, okay, and having a single form, one page if you earn below a certain amount of money, just one page tax form. So first of all, it was to reduce corruption and make sure that more people comply with tax. That's got to be good for the country.
Is that going to be effective? Because something I read on our website is that 1% of people pay tax.
Exactly.
Officially, 1%.
That was the last time figures were available in 2013. Incredible.
Pretty much anything would be effective when you've got such a low base you're starting from. And so I think that'll be a good boost. You know, there's a lot more that could be done, but that'll at least be a good boost. Then they've cut back on donations you can make to political parties. Again, anti-corruption move. The amount of cash transactions, the maximum amount you can transact if you're using cash. Again, money laundering and a cutback on corruption. So it's an anti-corruption budget. And I tell you what, the Romanians could learn a bit from the Indians.
And there was a lot there for poor, poor households, rural communities, and also as well there's regional elections coming up. I mean, it's a budget just ahead of regional elections.
It's very difficult to get a budget which looks after the farmers. It's an agrarian economy. 32% of GDP is pretty much coming from agriculture, which looks after those, as well as cutting corporate tax rates, making sure entrepreneurs, in the same budget, mentioning entrepreneurs as well as farmers. I think it was a pretty good budget.
Arun Jaitley said, India is largely a non-tax compliant society.
It's a polite way of saying corruption, corruption, corruption.
All right.
1%. Listen, forget about Chinese couriers. Let's talk about Ban Ki-moon. Let's end with Ban Ki-moon. First of all, he's not going to run for president. Was he a good Secretary General? He's just finished that job.
Well, he's hampered by the fact that the UN tends to be on the most critical things fairly ineffective, okay? Tends to be fairly ineffective. So they need him in South Korea. They've got impeachment proceedings going on at the moment against their existing administration. They might as well have somebody who's got the respectability of UN Secretary General. But he's saying, I don't want to be involved. And there was some mocking of him because he couldn't get on the underground, the tube. Because,
yeah, he put 2 notes into a machine. Come on. So that didn't reflect well on him.
So maybe not as respected as he might like to be.
And also as well, apparently local opinion polls, he was falling in ratings anyway. Apparently.
Yeah, well, he might be thinking, let me do a Hillary Clinton, go on the speaking circuit.
We know how reliable polls are, of course.
Yes, that's right. He will be very, very popular on the speaking circuit. It takes 6 months to book Kofi Annan, apparently. But just finally on Ban Ki-moon, it could be the end of a long, long political career. He's been Foreign Minister of South Korea, of course, being UN Secretary General. 2 terms it was. We may not really see him again on the international scene.
I wish when he was in the UN he could have got America to pay its fair share. When America talks about NATO not paying their fair share, I wish he could have got America to pay their fair share of their dues into the United Nations. Then maybe it would have been more effective as an international organisation and we wouldn't have some of the problems we've got in the world at the moment.
Thank you very much, Alpesh. It's always a great pleasure to have you here. Enjoy the rest of the day. See you soon.
You too, enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you soon.